Srdjan Kovacevic, are you the CEO of Orqa? Have I got that right?
I'm the CEO of Orqa, yes.
CEO of Orqa. Yep. I first met you at CES in, was it 2018? 2019? When the first...
19, I believe it was, yeah.
You guys were working on the Orqa FPV.One goggle, which was set to shake up what some would call a stagnant FPV goggle. I think you would call a stagnant FPV goggle market. Fat Shark resting on their laurels. I will say that. I won't make you say it. And a lot of competitors, Skyzone's, Eachines, trying to do as good, maybe not quite meeting it. And Orqa said, we're going to do something big. We're going to make the best FPV goggle that has really ever been made. I came out, I saw the prototype. It was very encouraging. And I feel like in a lot of ways you delivered on that promise. And now we're here just with the next generation of that goggle being released, the Orqa FPV Pilot, and trying to sort of carry that forward. How would you, let's start by just saying, how would you say the release of the FPV Pilot has gone compared to your expectations?
It exceeded all of our expectations. It really, I mean, we have only one such product launch to compare it with. And we had like two things. The uptake of the market was just amazing. We just had like orders coming in, and you know, we had our Kickstarter launch moment, but on our own website kind of thing. When we opened up the sales, emails just, you know, PayPal emails just started coming in, and you know, we had our resellers like reorder their first orders a few days after they made their original order. So that was quite amazing. And then the second part is, you know, after the first the FPV.One V1 started hitting the market, we had a lot of tickets incoming. You know, a lot of user tickets incoming. Oh, bug this, bug that. This doesn't work. Hardware bugs, software bugs. So you know, with that expectations, you know, we released this new product, and it started hitting the market in quantities much larger than we previously had, you know, in these first days. And then, you know, we were now expecting, you know, the usual deluge of tickets incoming, and we had almost zero. We had like two minor issues, which is everything is done in-house. So it's very easy for us to kind of, you know, fix things in stride. So you know, the first 100 units that get delivered, you know, these are the first 100 units that they get made. And then if we catch something in the meantime, the next 100 will not have that thing, or the next 50, you know, how many we do in a given time frame. So it was, you know, we were expecting to kind of start fixing shit, pardon my French, and you know, this is it's not happening. You know, people are really happy with how things work.
One reason why that rollout may have gone smoothly is because of the way that the FPV Pilot sort of builds on the FPV.One. You know, as you look at the feature list and the changes made in the FPV Pilot, which of those changes would you say are sort of more incremental versus sort of generational? For example, the custom digital input for the Orqa digital FPV system probably would be seen as generational. Other things maybe more incremental. How would you break that down?
Well, that's a very good observation. I would say that the product overall is incremental, because as we explained in that blog post that we made recently, you know, the V2 or FPV.One Pilot is basically sort of mid-cycle update that kind of got out of hand. We added a few, you know, generational things to the mix, and I would say that the central thing is basically the portal thing that we have here. It's not just a digital. It's not just a digital interface. I would say it's like a general purpose interface. You know, it's been designed to be sort of a Swiss Army knifey kind of thing, where you could do a lot of stuff with it. But of course, one of the things that you can do with it, you can pipe like a low latency, fast video signal through that port, and get it straight into the video processor chip.
Yeah, I have to admit that my first reaction when I saw that you'd come up with this proprietary interface was, why is it necessary? And not that there can't be a reason, but I didn't hear a reason compared to like HDMI. Like HDMI is the standard, works with everything, but here you've reinvented the wheel. What's the justification? What's the motivation there?
We still have HDMI, and we're going to have HDMI as you know, it's going to be there. But you know, this was a way for us to basically, you know, we had a way to pipe directly into the video. Let's call it a bus. It's not a bus technically, but you know, we can go straight into the video processor chip without having to go through HDMI receiver. And you know, whatever latency, and it just adds a tiny bit of latency. It's negligible, I think, in the greater scheme of things. But for what it's worth, you would get a tiny bit of latency less, you know, going straight there. But also, it would also allow stuff like, you know, you want a front-facing camera, you can put a front-facing camera there. You know, that also works. It will be used for digital video receiver. Among other things, that receiver will also have HDMI output to support other goggles, because we want our stuff to support, if you want to fly it on your Fat Sharks, if you want to fly it in your Sky Zones, if you want to fly it for whatever goggles there will be in the future, we're still going to support it.
So one of the things that I think Orqa has always been very good at, and I'm sure you get a lot of credit for this, is creating hype. And I don't mean hype in a bad way. I mean it in a neutral way. Creating hype. And sometimes those products live up to that hype. And other times, at least in some people's view, they don't. And I'm gonna try and pick like the clearest example, which is we're gonna have digital video systems at CES 2022 was an announcement that was made. And the hope, I think, so I know I can speak for myself. The hope was that we would see a digital FPV system. We know you've been working on it for several years. We'll release it when it's ready. We did see those video transmitters. We didn't see them working. We saw the goggles. And I think in a lot of ways, if you had said, we're going to be releasing a refresh of the Orqa FPV-One, you're going to love it. People might have loved it. But that hype built up to a level that then some people felt that maybe they didn't get what they were hoping to get. What do you say to that?
I think, you know, we get excited about stuff that we work on, and sometimes it's hard to contain that excitement. And maybe it's not, oftentimes it's not being communicated with a finesse that a company of our aspirations should, you know, have. So I can totally relate to that. And I would just say that, you know, it again boils down to us not being the best PR kind of savvy company out there. The systems that we showed, the digital systems that we showed, they're not market ready. And you know, what we showed at the CES, and we were very transparent of it. Everything that we showed, nothing was a mock-up. All three systems that we showed were actually the development prototypes that we just took off people's desks, put them in a nice, literally, and I mean literally, put them on people's desks, and then they were the only units that we had built. That's how crazy we basically are. 5.8 gig is the hardware design. I would call it done. So what you saw there, or what people saw there, this is very likely how it's going to look like. I don't expect to see many changes to that hardware. What's left to be done in the next couple of months is basically just software or firmware, if you want it. So, and that's more on the radio side rather than the video side. I would like to think that the video processing side is maybe 90% finished. And then still bits some work on the radio side.
Well, I do want to talk about the HD system and see what I can get out of you about the HD system. But before we talk
I don't tell you too much.
I hope you do. But before we move on from the goggles, I think we have to address probably the most controversial spec of the goggle, which is the field of view. So the Orqa FPV-One had I believe, 43-degree field of view, which is 44-degree field of view. Sorry about that. Which is pretty much, I would say, the gold standard. There have been goggles out there with larger field of view, like the HDO The HD2 had a 50-degree field of view, and it was too
Correct.
large. You can't blow a screen up that big in such a small goggle. You get blurry edges. Some people loved it, but many people didn't. 44 degrees, you hit the sweet spot, in my opinion, and I think many others. And here comes the FPV Pilot with a smaller field of view, 39, 37. And I've heard two schools of thought on this. One is that that's plenty, it's great, we love it. And the other is that people who are just think that, I can't tell whether they actually care or whether it's just that number go down bad. So, and I know you understand that in marketing, number go down equals bad equals complaints. So how much, what was the motivator behind making it smaller? That I think is the first question.
Mm-hmm. So basically, just to reflect on what you said in the intro, that was literally our train of thought when designing V1. So basically, you had your HD2s, that famous 50 degrees field of view. I tried it myself. It was indeed blurry on the edges, and there was this whole controversy. Some people loved it, some people didn't. And then exactly what you said. My original idea and my original goal when we were kind of speccing out the design of the optics, we aimed for 46 because I think there was a version of Attitudes that was 46, and that was, people loved that, right? So we said, okay, 50 is too large, probably 46 is a sweet spot. Let's go for the sweet spot. So it's always, you're always kind of trading something for something. So additionally, if you want to avoid crazy expensive fabrication or tooling, you need to stick with spherical optics. So if you want to do a spherics, it's probably you're probably looking at injection molding, and then the tooling is expensive. FPV is not really a market where you can sell volumes that would justify the type of tooling. So we need to stick with the spherical design. So when you're dealing with the spherical design, you're always bumping into these kind of constraints. So if you're optimizing for something else has to give. So what we did is when this whole mid-cycle upgrade thing happened, one of the things that really where it really snowballed was when we said, okay, let's if we're doing this, that, and that, let's do new optics. Let's do optics redesign because we're going to have time to do optics redesign in that time frame. Let's do it. And then we said, okay, what do we do differently? So we wanted to add a focus adjustment. So that was easy enough, and we could have done it with an existing optical system. But we said, okay, let's lose that. Let's show the whole image within the field of view of the optics, and let's make it best quality we can. Let's just optimize for quality. Let's optimize for sharpness and contrast.
So the argument I think that you're making is that the redesigned optics allow more people with more sort of physiognomy, I think is the word you use, different faces, different eyes, to see the entire screen, and that you're able to present a higher fidelity image with more detail, despite the fact that the resolution of the screen is the same. Is that about right?
Correct. Absolutely. So we traded size for quality. So what we did basically, we've given, I think it was like 2 millimeters or 1.5 millimeters on each side. We created a buffer of 1.5 millimeter on each side from the edge of the screen, so the last corner pixel, to the edge of the visible area that the optics show you. So
that means
we kind of,
if your eye isn't centered up, like I've had goggles before where your eye placement was extremely sensitive. If it wasn't perfectly centered, you wouldn't see the top or you wouldn't see the bottom. It sounds like you gave a little bit more relief by making the image smaller.
Yeah. So we accommodate a wider demographic.
Let's talk about, you mentioned the idea of future-proofing. And the V1 goggles, one of the things that you sold them on was the idea that they had a general purpose processor in them that you could enhance code, and you did that. You've released features like the ability to interface with GoPro and a lot of people don't know that this feature is available on the FPV-One, but it is. It's not just a new feature. You can stop recording and program your GoPro settings from inside the goggle, the ability to live stream from the goggle, and so forth. You've added these features. But then, sometime back, you announced that it's not end of support, it's not end of life for the FPV-One, but I think you said the end of sort of major feature development. Is that right?
That was just a stupid mistake. That was miscommunicated, and that was falsely communicated. Again, this is one of the things that I addressed in that blog post, and that poor communication came back to bite us more than any sort of bad communication that we had in the past, because it was marketing coming away from an internal meeting with their own conclusions, and us not having like a internal control of what gets published and what doesn't get published. What basically happened on that meeting was that we had like regular dev meetings every week, and first few weeks of FPV-One being launched, we had like a bug tickets coming in, like a backlog of bugs to work through, and also backlog of feature requests to work through to decide what's cool, what's not cool. And slowly but surely, we have worked through those two lists, and they were empty. We reached the end of the game, and that was like, high fives all around. And, marketing came away from that meeting. It's like, okay, mission accomplished, let's raise the flag, and we're done, move on. And that was, the moment that got posted, I reacted and said, this is not true. And so we retracted that, but Cat was out of the bag.
Yeah.
And people were like, what are you doing? It's just a poor communication.
One of the things in that message, I thought I remembered saying basically that you had reached the capacity of the hardware. I don't know the specific, whether it was processor or storage or whatever, but that there basically was no more potential to continue to upgrade it.
No.
And some people said, well, that's fine, but what about...
the compute is the same. So one thing that didn't change between the V1 and the Pilot is basically it's the same main architecture. Okay, we removed the FPGA to drive the panels, but that's like, it just the goggles are not heating up that much anymore. But the main compute and the video processor are all like literally the same thing.
So does that mean that any features released for the V2, obviously anything dependent on that digital interface wouldn't apply, but does that mean that any features or upgrades released for the Orqa FPV Pilot would also be ported back to the FPV-One? There's no reason why that couldn't happen.
Yeah. I mean, look at the last feature. Last update that we did a couple of days ago. It was last week. You had new features added to the V1, and the new features added to the and some bug fixes for the Pilot. And we've also updated the menus on the V1. So when you turn on the V2 and the V1, they have the same look and feel of the menus. This refreshed menu look. So and everything is running a bit faster, I think. So yeah, I think that kind of fact basically puts to rest the future proofing.
Yeah, that's good
argument.
I have to acknowledge. When you say, we looked at the bug list and there were no reports coming in and we thought mission accomplished. I've seen some people in the comments thread from the Facebook post where you made that announcement, and they said, there are outstanding bugs. I'm not going to be able to give you specifics because I'm not looking at it. I think some of them had to do with the Wi-Fi streaming or with the DVR offload. There were people saying there are bugs that are outstanding. And I think when you say, mission accomplished, we cleaned the bug list, I guarantee you there's going to be people down in the comments with lists of bugs they say are outstanding. How can we reconcile that?
Support at orqafpv.com or info@orqafpv.com. I'm receiving every damn email that comes to info@orqafpv.com. Send me those bugs. They're going to be sent to the engineers, and we're going to work through them.
The 2.4 gigahertz one, I looked at it and I thought, unless you're flying a very big, like a 7 or a 9 or a 10-inch quad or a wing, too big. Not for a 5-inch pilot, not for racing, kind of not for FPV pilots.
No, that's correct, yeah.
The 5.8 gigahertz one, size-wise, could work. could work. I couldn't get a great read on the size or the weight, but looked about in the ballpark of something like an Air unit or a Vista. Only 200 milliwatts output power. And as I understand it, is that, I mean, I've been on record heavily critical of HD0 at 200 milliwatts, saying that's fine for racers, but it's not good enough for general purpose. You need more power. You need more penetration than that. So the message is not unique to Orqa. How do you respond to that?
So 200 milliwatts, I think it's a regulatory limit in the EU. And I think that the current hardware that we have, the amps, I think we can go up to 800. Possibly it's possibly 600. Don't get my word on it. We certainly will be using as much as, and we'll be outputting as much as we can legally, right? So it will not. So in the folks in EU, sorry guys, that's the regulation. You're going to fly at 200. If you're in the US, you're going to fly as much as the FCC allows, which I believe is one watt. That being said, I don't see that as an issue. It's more of a regulatory thing.
Well, I mean, what happens now? You don't need me to tell you. Is with analog transmitters, you have companies like Immersion RC who toe the line very closely. You can't change the region. You can't unlock them without a special tool. But then you have companies like TBS who let you unlock it, and many European pilots do, and they break the rules, and that's what they want to do. Same with DJI. You've got the FCC hack and the 1200 milliwatt hack, and somehow they managed to sort of thread that needle. And like, as much as I want to be, supportive of companies who obey regulatory rules, which they're there for a reason. Customers, I don't think, are as enthusiastic. They just want to do what they want to do. And I wonder, I think that there a lot of people are going to see that as a deal breaker, at least people in the EU.
Yeah, I mean, that we are an EU company. We're not a Hong Kong-based company to be able to kind of skirt the law in that way. You get fined if you kind of put stuff out there that's illegal. And we certainly don't want to do that. I can totally understand that some people are willing to kind of go against the rules and run their equipment or use all sorts of loopholes, or maybe order from a US, a vendor that's not going to get fined for selling stuff, that you will not be able to sell in the EU, and they will fly it in the EU. But we cannot fight that. And if somebody, if you are comfortable enough to radiate what you're not supposed to radiate in your home country, it's your thing. We know what we have to do in order to abide to the rules, and we're certainly going to do that as a company. I just don't see how we could get away with breaking right. the law and not getting fined. But just to make things clear, we will also be selling in the US, which is our largest market, US legal products that are going to output as much as legally possible, and we will sell that through the network in the US. Sadly, we will not be able to sell that through our resellers in the EU, because they themselves would also be fined by selling that, so they cannot do it themselves.
That's that alone, I think, to me, is one of the best pieces of information that I've got out of this interview, though, because until recently, I thought the message was that 200 milliwatts was the max, and there were no plans to increase it. If that thing goes up to even 600, but even better 800 or a watt, especially because it's a true MIMO transmitter and not just a single, so you're going to get more penetration and range out of that milliwatts. Now, you've taken a very cool approach to your image processing. What DJI and HD0 have done is they've created these custom silicon, these ASICs, I believe they are, and that's how they do their processing of the image. But you're doing a general purpose software programmed, basically a little miniature graphics card.
I don't think that DJI did an ASIC.
No? If I'm wrong, I could be wrong. I could certainly be wrong about that.
Maybe that's just me.
Okay.
But there's a lot of theories about that, but I don't believe it's an ASIC. That being said, I don't think you will get a lot of. So we're not. Our video processing is not running on a software stack, so it's not an application. It's a hardware feature of the SoC that we're using. So it's like it is hard coded, hardware implemented code, right? So we're leveraging that. So it's not going to be flexible in a way that you would expect.
Well, let me clarify that though before we go forward, because I want to make sure I've got that right. When you say that, I don't think you mean, from what other things I've heard you say, that it's literally like baked into an ASIC and locked forever. Do you mean that it's got like a graphics coprocessor that's doing some kind of modulation or encoding, or do you mean what do you mean by that?
So okay. So when you have like a general purpose computing capacity on sort of like a resource on a chip, you run applications on it, right? So that it means that you're running an operating system, and sometimes our operating systems are not real time, and then that means that you get all sorts of jitter, and your timings are you cannot rely that it keeps time correctly. Now, if on some of these SoCs, you're going to get some features that are not actually applications that are running in the user space. So we are heavily leveraging that type of feature in the SoC that we're using. So you are getting like a pretty neat and fast hardware performance. Hardware like fast performance that's enabled by something that's baked into the chip.
Well, let's talk about the latency. So, what kind of latency are you targeting? What kind of latency are you targeting?
So we're targeting what you're getting with the DJI. That we certainly want to or Vista, which is the same thing. We want to do at least as little as them.
So
right,
25 milliseconds glass to glass, approximately.
Yes. Everything above that would not be. I would not be happy with that, and we're certainly gunning for less.
And would the system have variable latency with retransmissions similar to DJI, or would it be more like HD0, where it is closer to like a broadcast-based system with constant latency?
What we are trying to achieve is to be somewhere in the middle, to get this latency jitter down to a point that you can actually race on it, and that would be amazing if we hit it. And the thing is that after below certain latency, it's imperceptible, right? So if we let's say that we know for a fact, and we did those like sneaky experiments where we would send a firmware to one of our test pilots that are racing, and tell them, okay, this is a different firmware. Why don't you try it out? We don't tell them what it is. We did it with one of the firmwares on the V1, where we wanted to do a different thing, and it added a frame of latency. So frame in a 60 FPS is 16.7 milliseconds. Now, for a fact, we know that 16.7 is perceptible, but people will not be able to put their finger on what's going on. They will feel it. They will not be able to articulate it, right? So we had a guy send us an email like this, trying to, I would say, articulate his frustration on something, but he could not. There was no mention of the word latency, right?
Right.
It's something, but I don't know what.
Interesting.
So it's perceptible. So 16 millisecond already is perceptible, but you would not, if you don't know its latency, you do not say latency.
You got to give us
that kind of thing.
You got to give us a menu option just for people like me in the goggles, where if we turn the menu option on, it adds a frame of latency or 2 frames, and then I can make a video where I give people the goggles and say, "Here, fly this. Tell me what you think." And I change it secretly and see if, because a lot of people say, you can't tell the difference. And I'm like, yes, you can.
That was funny because our engineers were telling me, "Oh no, they will not be able to tell this." I was like, "No, these guys will, especially if they're racing, they will know. They will know." So the truth was somewhere in between. They didn't know, but they could tell the difference. Mm-hmm. And I had a sense that this is gonna what's gonna be. And it was a really fun experiment that we did. But my point is, I digress. My point really is that I believe that there is a threshold in a jitter where it's not even going to be perceptible. Now, if the latency in the order of magnitude, like 20, let's say tens of milliseconds, we're talking about 20, 25 milliseconds, jitter is in the order of magnitude of lower single digits of a millisecond. So we're talking about maybe what we're seeing on the DJI. I think we're talking about 5 milliseconds, here and there. So that's what your jitter. So if you can take your jitter down below a certain threshold, I would argue that jitter would be imperceptible even for the racers, and it would not affect the performance. So we are aiming for that kind of sweet spot to still be able to have the really nice quality that you get from using video processing that really requires that type of stuff that you only get on the type of SoCs that we're dealing with, and still do it with a jitter low enough, then it's not going to make a difference. So that you'll be able to fly the same system both for freestyle and for racing. Now, to be entirely fair, the jury is out there whether we succeed in that or not. But we're certainly gunning. Jitter is something that we are concerned about, and we're optimizing for. First, it's going to be latency, and then it's going to be jitter.
I think that is about. I think I'm about asked everything I could think of to ask. It's been a real pleasure talking to you. I really appreciate you taking so much time. And
no, thank you.